of discontinuing the action up until moments before it began. So,
If I could follow up, you're saying that there was no time in which when he actually said...
To report live and direct from Washington, Larry Speaks, the presidential spokesman, is speaking at the White House, informing reporters and the country about a raid tonight, short time ago, by U.S. aircraft against Libya. Again, Larry Speaks.
the President was consulting with members of Congress, as we always have in the past on actions of this type. Owen?
Bombing specifically retaliation for the bombing in the West Berlin discotheque, or is it also in connection with the TWA blast?
This effort on our part is an effort to preempt Gaddafi from making future terrorist attacks on us. It is a self-defense move to prevent future attacks. So, Peter?
If I could follow, you had mentioned as evidence the death of the serviceman in West Berlin. Do you have
Yes.
any other direct evidence linking to
Well, we do not have any specific evidence or direct evidence as yet to link Gaddafi to the TWA incident. However, we do have highly reliable intelligence that Gaddafi and his key lieutenants are planning more attacks on U.S. citizens and facilities in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. In Africa, Libyans have been planning attacks and conducting surveillance of U.S. facilities in 10 countries. Last week, 3 Libyan agents arrived in one African state to set up the bombing of our embassy, chancellery, and the kidnapping of our ambassador. In the Middle East, the Libyans have planned several attacks against U.S. embassies and have encouraged other terrorist groups there to conduct similar attacks. In Latin America, Libyan diplomats have been surveilling Libyan diplomats have been surveilling U.S. diplomats and their dependents. Libya has also directed its agents to strike U.S. commercial interests, including U.S. international air carriers. So, Peter?
Larry, how were these specific targets chosen?
These specific targets were chosen because, as I said in my statement, they strike at the very heart of Gaddafi's ability to conduct terrorism.
You're saying terrorist camps, training camps?
No, I indicated that they were the various aspects of Gaddafi's command and control. Gaddafi is the infrastructure of his ability to operate terrorists.
Because you've labeled the diplomatic route as one of the routes by which Gaddafi has transmitted his orders, for instance, to the embassy in East Berlin.
Yeah, I don't understand your question.
Well, strike what targets? Diplomatic targets? Is it
No,
a
as I
diplomatic command?
indicated, these are terrorist infrastructure, command and control, intelligence, communications, logistics, and training, all of the above.
You have said that Gaddafi's government itself is a terrorist apparatus. So I'm trying to find out whether it's the Gaddafi military, the Gaddafi diplomatic side, where the targets were located.
The specifics of this are that we have asked, as far as the diplomatic areas, we have asked a number of governments to take steps at those in their countries who are perpetuating this type of violence.
I don't mean to belabor
I
it, but I
understand.
assume
What you're asking is that we attacked the diplomatic headquarters in Libya. I can't answer that question.
You did say, though, command and control, communications, and so forth. I would assume that would be Libyan, to provide their links to terrorist bureaus abroad and so forth.
Well,
These not necessarily
yes,
just...
I will leave that to you to make presumptions. Now, let me raise a question. I know you have a number of questions. I think we have generally answered basically what we can answer at this time. The President will be speaking at noon, or at 9 p.m., and at 9:30, Secretary Schultz and Secretary Weinberger will be here. At that time, we will have more information and can be more specific.
Well, can you say definitely that we knew that no Americans would be hit when we were attacking the military bases?
We took every precaution to see that no civilians were involved. We struck at targets that were military targets and terrorist targets. Let's wait, Miles, just a second. I'll call on you. What?
Character-based planes, or did we use...
I won't be specific on that at this time.
Americans, Larry, are we prepared to evacuate Americans in Libya should the need rise?
As you know, the President issued instructions to Americans that they should leave Libya, and issued an executive order which makes it illegal for them to be there.
On their own?
So, Walter?
Larry, given Gaddafi's past behavior, what makes you think that this will do anything other than escalate the violence between Libya and the United States?
Well, we will just have to wait and see what the results of this are. Let me say once again that I would like to leave a lot of these questions for Secretary Weinberger and for Secretary Schultz. Let's answer questions that are pertinent to the information we have now, and we'll try to wind this down as quickly as possible. Bob, I'm going to come to you.
Were these attacks at all triggered by the failure of the U.S. to get the allies to take tougher measures? You talked about the EEC.
That question was asked earlier. We have gradually increased our effort to indicate to Mr. Gaddafi that we will not tolerate his terrorism, and this is that. So, Joanna.
It's not at all tied to that.
Well, I made my statement. Joanna.
Larry, you said this was an evolving decision on the president's part. The option to strike, did you approve that yesterday, last
I'm
week?
just not going to go into this. It doesn't serve any purpose whatsoever.
Well, I think
So,
it's a matter for history.
Was there any of the defensive suppression, did that take the form of bombing and strafing of weaponry on the ground, and did the Libyans shoot back?
I just do not have that type of information yet. So, Andy?
Was any decision made one way or the other about targeting Colonel Gaddafi as part of this operation?
We targeted these key areas that we knew were military and related targets, and that were connected with terrorism, and his whereabouts, is up to where he wants to be.
Larry?
So,
This is a live CBS News report. You have been watching the wind down to a long and detailed briefing at the White House by White House spokesman Larry Speakes. The United States launched a series of what were called, and I quote, carefully planned airstrikes against Libyan targets tonight. These targets were described as, quote, terrorist centers, also command and control operations of Colonel Gaddafi, and what Larry Speakes called the infrastructure of the Gaddafi terror network. No other details were given. Also hit were what were called limited defense suppression missions. Also underway had been limited defense suppression missions. You understand that sometimes such things as radar installations are taken out by attacking aircraft in order to protect other aircraft. Now, Speakes said that the strikes were conducted shortly before 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight and were finished within a half hour. On the CBS Evening News earlier, you may have heard Jeffrey Fager and Alan Pizzi talk over gunfire and the sounds of explosions in and around Tripoli itself. Now, Speakes said tonight that President Reagan ordered the airstrikes because of evidence that tied Colonel Gaddafi of Libya to bombing of a discotheque in West Berlin April 5th, and what he called evidence that further attacks against American targets were being planned by the Libyans. Now, the Associated Press reports the story this way. We're going to go to Bill Plant, our White House correspondent, in just a moment for some more details on what has been happening within this past hour. The Associated Press reports that the United States carried out a series of those carefully planned airstrikes against Libya in retaliation for recent terrorism. That would correspond with what CBS News correspondent Alan Pizzi reported earlier, that it sounded like that there were a series of raids underway, and what Jeffrey Fager, the CBS newsman in Tripoli, had reported that it sounded like that for less than half an hour, maybe 20, 25 minutes, it sounded like a series of air raids that they could not tell whether there had been any naval bombardment included, but they did not think that that had been included. Now, Deputy Press Secretary Larry Speakes said that American military aircraft attacked terrorist centers and military targets of just before 7 o'clock U.S. time. He said, and I quote, U.S. military forces have executed a series of carefully planned airstrikes against terrorist-related targets in Libya. Speakes said that the planes involved in these attacks were in the process of returning to their carriers. There was no word on any casualties on either side. Now, that's a summary of what appears to have happened over the last 1 hour, perhaps 1 hour plus, in Washington and in Libya. Bill Plant, the President speaks to the nation tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 8 o'clock Central Time. That'll be a live televised statement from the Oval Office.
That's right, Dan. We expect the president to justify this military action against Libya tonight by pointing out that the response of the United States since the Libyans began their terrorist activities has been gradual, a point that Speakes also made in the briefing you just saw. That there were economic sanctions tried. There was, of course, the military action a couple of weeks ago in the Gulf of Sidra. But then, after the bombing in Berlin, after the terrorist bombing at the discotheque, then this action. And the warning, of course, the implied warning will be that we will strike again if there is more terrorist activity.
Well, indeed, Larry Speaks spoke of some information that the Libyans were planning additional terrorist attacks.
They've made quite plain over the last couple of days that their message interceptions include a series of attacks on various American military and diplomatic installations, both in Europe and in Latin America. So they claim that they've forestalled some of these, that others are still hanging fire. This mission tonight was plainly designed to keep those from happening.
And this was, although we know little in detail about it, this was clearly a much bigger airstrike against Libya than the one we had some weeks ago, in which the radar installation was taken out and a couple of ships were hit.
In the action over the Gulf of Sidra, Dan, United States warplanes never went over over the Libyan homeland, over their territory. Tonight they conducted regular bombing runs before they were offshore.
They were offshore, but they did hit a radar installation, did they not, with one of those air-to-ground rockets?
With rockets, but this time they used bombs. They were over Libya itself. It's significant to note, I think, that they conducted this raid at night. The Libyan Air Force is not known for its nighttime operational skills. Stand
by, if you will, Bill Plant at the White House. Alan Pizzi, who's done such a wonderful job for us in Tripoli over this last hour under difficult circumstances. Alan Pizzi, are you hearing me all right in Tripoli, and what is the situation there now?
Dan, right now it's very quiet. About 10 minutes ago, while Larry Speaks was talking at the White House, there were a few more flashes of anti-aircraft fire, but I don't think they were directed at anything in particular. And since then, it's been almost like a normal night here. We can still hear traffic. There's the glow of street lights and the lights from buildings, but the hotel is still completely blacked out, and there's no other sound. There's no sound of ground explosions, nothing to indicate that a raid has just taken place here.
Alan, we're now in the process of a special report on our full CBS network. Could you recap for us what happened, what you saw, and what you heard beginning just before 7 o'clock tonight, Eastern United States time?
Dan, I was awakened by the sound of a jet coming in very low and very fast. It's a familiar sound to anyone who's worked in Lebanon. It was very definitely a plane on a bombing run, and suddenly anti-aircraft fire opened up from various points all around the city. There were tracer going into the air from all kinds of places. It didn't look like there were missiles going up, but there were a series of very, very loud explosions as of bombs hitting the ground rather than missiles or anything going off. There were at least 2 planes, possibly as many as 4 or more. It was impossible to tell because we couldn't see the planes, but the explosions were taking place in the parts of the city that we could see, although you couldn't actually see any flashes from the explosions. The planes made repeated passes, and that went on for, I would think, less than 20 minutes, and then they were gone. There was a pall of smoke could be seen through the glow of the night lights of the city, and there were a few more sporadic outbursts of anti-aircraft fire, and that was it.
And Alan, it was mentioned earlier in your reports and in Jeffrey Fager's reports before you came back in off the streets that some of the sounds sounded to be coming from at least the direction and in and around, if not at, the Gaddafi palace. Any more that you can tell us about that?
No, nothing at all, I'm afraid, Dan. We did not see the glow or the flash of any impacts, and we're not exactly sure where the targets were located in relation to the hotel. So I really couldn't say whether Gaddafi's residential or office area was hit, and I couldn't say what specifically was hit. We're not really being allowed out of the hotel. There's really no way to get out at the moment. The hotel has been blacked out, and there aren't any cars available. Taxis don't cruise around here. And all I can tell you is what we can see, and that's not very much. It was very obviously a large strike, but it's strange that you don't see the signs of anything burning.
Alan Pizzi in Tripoli, if you'll hold right on there, we have some additional information from Washington to pass along. For those viewers who may have joined us late or in progress, this is a CBS News special report, a report about tonight's United States airstrikes against Libya. Some of those strikes were in and around Tripoli. The United States officially called these, quote, carefully planned airstrikes against Libya in retaliation for recent terrorist acts. Among the targets were what the White House called terrorist centers, command and control points, and some of the infrastructure of Gaddafi's terrorism network. Now, from one, and I emphasize from one high congressional source in Washington. CBS News has been told, this has not been confirmed, but one from high congressional source, one source has told CBS News in Washington that leaders in the Senate and House are being told that the targets, that among the targets were these, 3 major targets in the Tripoli area, including Gaddafi's headquarters there, 2 missile batteries and 2 terrorist camps, in addition to 1 terrorist training area. Now, among the military targets listed by this one high congressional source in Washington were a military barracks. This was a military barracks where Gaddafi's headquarters were suspected of being. 5 targets, 3 near Tripoli and 2 on the other side of the Gulf of Sidra. Now, we'll try to get a map up for you shortly, but if you will envision looking down on the map, the Gulf of Sidra, that large gulf over which there's been so much dispute. Tripoli, as you look down on the map, is on the western, or if you will, the left-hand side as you look down on the map. And this source says that of the 5 targets, 3 were near Tripoli and 2 on the other side of the Gulf of Sidra. Now, this unconfirmed report, again emphasizing this is one congressional source, says that F-111s from Great Britain, from bases in Great Britain, were used in this airstrike. F-111s are a high-tech fighter bomber designed to be contour earth-hugging in order to avoid radar. According to this source, that the F-111s from Britain were used. The Allies are said to have been in agreement, but while they do not support the U.S. policy, they do not condemn the U.S. publicly. That, according to this source, was the agreement before these strikes were made. Now, as part of our CBS News continuing coverage of U.S. airstrikes tonight against Libya, David Martin is at the Pentagon. David, you just heard what we passed along from that one high congressional source. Can you confirm any or all of that?
I cannot confirm that independently, Dan. Everyone here in the Pentagon has absolutely disappeared from sight. Admiral Crow is not in his office. He's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Secretary Weinberger is not in his office. I suspect Secretary Weinberger is in the White House Situation Room. I suspect Admiral Crow is either at the White House or in the National Military Command Center here at the Pentagon, monitoring the return of these planes to their bases, because the one thing we do not have yet is any casualty count on American planes. Were any American planes lost? And that was one of the big hang-ups among administration officials, particularly with Secretary Weinberger, when it came to retaliating against Libya. The prospect of losing American pilots to either a lucky shot or to a barrage of anti-aircraft fire, the prospect that Americans would either lose their lives or be taken hostage and held as POWs by Gaddafi.
David, do we have any information on possible casualties either side? Larry Speaks in his briefing gave no such information.
No, and I think it's much too early to expect any kind of casualty reports from the Libyan side. I think it will take until daylight in Libya, when some of our reconnaissance satellites and perhaps some of our faster spy planes can get over Libya and take some damage assessment pictures, and then bring that back and see exactly what damage was done. Although you can just tell by listening to the menu that Larry Speaks read off that this was a very large attack. He's talking about command and communications, which is another way of saying headquarters. He's talking about intelligence sites, communications, and that had been brought up by a number of people in the days prior to this attack, that if you knocked out the communication sites, you would knock out Gaddafi's capability to communicate with the People's Bureaus overseas, which has been a major means by which he has sent out orders to conduct these terrorist attacks against Americans.
David, the F-111s, we have this so far unconfirmed report, but from a high congressional source. The senators and congressmen are being told that F-111s from Great Britain were used in this raid. For what purpose are F-111s designed?
The F-111 is a long-range plane, much longer range than anything off a carrier. It is designed for low-level bombing attacks. It's fitted with a contour following radar, so that the pilot, who cannot react to the ground when he's going close to the speed of sound, the pilot almost puts the plane on automatic. The plane flies itself, sensing the rises and dips in the ground, and concentrates on the one job of delivering a bomb as accurately as possible. And they are one of the the most powerful long-range bombers in the American arsenal. I should add that this report from this congressional source is given credence by the fact that there were reports from England throughout the day, and actually over the weekend too, of unusual activity at the base where these F-111s are located. And when we asked to find out what that activity was related to here in the Pentagon, we were told that it was an exercise routine called by the commander at his discretion, and we were actually given guidance at one point that you would be wrong to assume that this had something to do with Libya. It now appears from this congressional source that as of 4 p.m. this afternoon, those planes were airborne and en route to Libya.
David, if you'll continue to stand by as part of our CBS News special coverage, repeating that the United States has carried out a series of what it calls carefully planned airstrikes against Libya in retaliation for recent terrorist acts. Now that we have a map up, if we can put this map up for you, we will repeat what a high congressional source told CBS News tonight were among the targets. Now, looking at the map, of course, Libya is this entire area here that you see with the Gulf of Sidra out front of it, the Mediterranean beyond that. The congressional source had 5 targets, at least 5 targets were hit. 3 near Tripoli to the west, 2 on the other side of the Gulf of Sidra, at least in the general area of Benghazi. That the 3 major targets in the Tripoli area included Gaddafi's headquarters, 2, possibly 3 missile batteries, 2 terrorist camps, and 1 terrorist training area. Now, among the military targets, the strictly military targets listed were a military barracks where Gaddafi's headquarters was suspected of having been. Now, that is the 3 major targets in the Tripoli area. About the 2 other targets said to have been hit on the other side of the Gulf of Sidra from Tripoli, we have no information. We have been told by this one high congressional source that F-111s had taken off from bases in Britain and were used in the attack. Now, White House correspondent Bill Plant. Bill, are you still there? And do we have any later word from the White House? The President is expected to address the nation at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, just over an hour and 7 minutes from now.
Dan, we've been told by one White House source, and I emphasize by one, that all of the American aircraft have returned safely. Now, that may be a little bit preliminary. We hope, of course, that it's true. But I emphasize one White House source is saying that all of the American aircraft have returned safely or are safely out of range. I'm not sure which. We do expect the President to speak at 9 o'clock to justify, if you will, this attack on Libya, to explain the reasons for it to the American people. The White House, I should add, is very confident of support from the public for any military action they decided to take. They were very plain about that during this past week.
Bill, no one has seen the President late this afternoon or this evening that you know of.
Dan, we saw him walk across the avenue which separates the White House from the old executive office meeting to go to a highly secret meeting, which included a number of people from the cabinet, senators from Capitol Hill, in which apparently the final plans for this bombing raid were discussed.
Thank you, Bill, and stick with us, if you will, as part of our special coverage. We want to play now on audio tape. The audio tape that we got from Jeffrey Fager, CBS newsman, who is helping our veteran correspondent, Alan Pizzi, in Tripoli. Now, this is an audio tape recording that was broadcast live during the second edition of tonight's CBS Evening News while the raid was underway in Tripoli. This is CBS newsman Jeffrey Fager in Tripoli. This is the audio recording replay of the report we had from him within this past hour.
We hear some pops. Here you go. I don't know if you were able to pick that up. It looks like, that sounds like it's Libyan fire, returning fire. It appeared that there was an attack and that there were some shells. It's just very difficult to tell from here.
Well, you could hear clearly in the background some of the ordnance, some of the weapons hitting from the U.S. airstrike, and some of the return fire that the Libyans put off in the direction of the striking U.S. warplanes. That was Jeffrey Fager on an audio tape recording made within this past hour, which is when the strikes started and ended. They lasted some 25 to 30 minutes in and around Tripoli on one side of the Gulf of Sidra, and it's believed that there were at least 2 strikes made on the other side of the Gulf of Sidra, that is to say, on the eastern side of the Gulf of Sidra. Now, among the targets on the eastern side of the Gulf of Sidra would be the SAM-5 missile sites. There are some SAM-5 missile sites over there. Those of you who remember the last and much smaller U.S. military activity in and around Libya out over the Gulf of Sidra, the last time they struck, what they did was they knocked out the radar for some of those SAM missile sites. In order to fire the SAM missiles, a ground-to-air missile, the radar is what helps pinpoint those missiles on a target. And so the suppression raids by aircraft frequently go in and knock out the radar itself, so the enemy cannot fire the SAM missiles, or when they do, that the accuracy of the missiles is off. Now, emphasizing, we do not know that any SAM-5 missile sites were attacked as part of this targeting for this raid that has happened within the hour. What we have been told by a high congressional source, he says that senators and members of the House are being told that there were 5 targets, 3 near Tripoli and 2 on the other side of the Gulf of Sidra. That among the aircraft hitting Libya tonight were F-111s said to have been based in Britain. Again, we can't underscore it too often. We do not have that information confirmed from an independent source. David Martin is still standing by at the Pentagon. David, when would you expect that we would have a full accounting, let's say a fuller accounting than we've had thus far? Larry Speaks did the best he could and gave some detail. Would you expect it any time before the President speaks to the nation in about an hour and 3 minutes from now?
Well, I think he's probably, or I should say the White House is in direct communication with the pilots of these returning planes so that we can get an accurate assessment from the President of whether or not any planes have been lost, although I think it's probably about a 3-hour flight at those speeds from the Mediterranean back to England, so the planes would not have had a chance to return all the way to their bases by the time the President goes on at 9 p.m. There's been no mention yet of carrier-based aircraft, and I feel certain that carrier-based aircraft were used in some fashion, perhaps not to conduct the strikes, but perhaps to fly protective air cover for the F-111s as they went in low.
David, let me interrupt you. I'm sorry to have to interrupt you, but we need to get off for at least the moment for our affiliated stations. The United States has struck by air against Libya tonight. No casualties are reported. An early report says all U.S. planes returned safely. Dan Rather, CBS News, New York.
And a reminder, President Reagan's address to the nation can be seen and heard on Channel 5 tonight at 8 o'clock.
And you're still planning on the special with Bill Boner at 10:30, if that's how the schedule works out?
I think the schedule will probably hold for 10:30, and if there is a CBS News special on this, that'll be seen probably immediately after. I suggest you tune into our 10 o'clock news, and we'll have that all down for sure at that time.
Thanks for watching.
Good night, everyone.